Good evening to all girls. Welcome you all for my English class. Before going to the lesson, I'll ask one question. If you know the answer, comment in the comment section. I have a branches but no fruit, trunk or leaves. What am I? Once again I will repeat. I have branches but no fruit, trunk or leaves. What am I? If you know the answer, just answer in the comment section. Okay, today we are going to see the new lesson that is in the prose part. Title is With the Photographer, written by Stephen Leacock. I know everyone like to take a photograph. Nowadays, in current scenario, most of them are adapted to take a selfie through their handwrite phones. So here narrator. Here who is a narrator means a writer is a narrator. He is the speaker. In this lesson, he shared his own experience with the photographer. Everyone had the experience when we visit to the studio. When we went to the studio. So here also Stephen Leacock shared his photograph experience. Just a single photo. For that, how the photographer took a long time in the decade before. But nowadays we are each moment taking a picture. I'm right? Okay. Before going to the lesson, first we learn about writer. So, the writer name is Stephen Leacock. His full name was Stephen P.H. Butler Leacock. Was an English-born Canadian writer and humorist. From 1908 to 1936, he was the head of the Department of Economics and Political Science at McGill University in Montreal, Quebec. He was a great writer, Canadian writer, as well as a humorist. In his spare time, he published a number of best-selling collections of humorous essays and tales. So when he was free, that time he started to write and published a number of best-selling collections of humorous essays and tales. His short stories are tinged with a gentle humor and sarcasm. His short stories are cheered with a gentle humor and sarcasm. They are mostly anecdotal, mostly informal, and they are entered either around himself or his life event. Leacock's flair for teaching is clearly visible in all his writing. To Leacock, humor was the ultimate expression of human kindness and progress. His writings were a rich source of therapy to the numerous wretched and hopeless people who were victims of the Great Depression. His writing was a rich source of therapy. Those who are in Great Depression. He is known for his light humor along with the criticism of people's follies. He was educated at Upper Canadian College. His language was English. His genre was humor and his subject was science. and his notable works are Sunshine, Sketches of a Little Town, Arcadian Adventures with the Idle Rich, My Financial Career. These are the notable works. Now, let's see about the prose, that is, with the photographer. The story is about the author Leacock himself and his tries with an annoying photographer in the latest studio. The photographer wanted to prove his artistic skill by taking the best photograph. He therefore took the author's head in his hands and twisted it sideways and looked at it moreover. He did not like author's head and asked him to open and close his mouth and dropped his ears little more to roll his eyes under the eyelids, to put his hands on his knees, to turn his face slightly upward, to expand the lungs, to bend the neck and to contract the face. So when the narrator visited to the studio to take a photo, when the photographer commanded his appearance, and then he asked to obey his instruction. So the narrator also followed and he obeyed. Leacock, annoyed by the humiliation and insult to his face, and started to rise from the seat. And at this moment of suspended animation, the photographer took his photograph. The photographer looked pleased as he had caught a features just in the moment of animation. On Saturday, when the author went back to get his photograph, he was quite shocked and surprised as the photographer had made a lot of changes. In his face, he had removed the eyebrows and retouched the eyes. The purpose of the photograph didn't look like the author's photo at all. The purpose of the photograph wasted, as the man in the photograph was quite different from himself. So, in the next section, what happened? When here the narrator tried to control his anger, but at last he rose from his seat. He argued, "It is my face, it is heavenly face, it is my only face." So like that he argued. At the time, the photographer took a photo. And then he said, "At last, I take a perfect picture of you," said by photographer. Narrator asked to show that photo. But the photographer said, "Come on Saturday. I will develop the negative and I will keep it." So the next Saturday, narrator visit the studio again. When the author went back to get his photograph, he was quite shocked and surprised as the photograph had made a lot of changes. He had a surprised and he had a shocked because the photographer did a lot of changes in his face, quietly different from himself in the photograph. He had removed the eyebrows and retouched the eyes. The purpose of the photograph didn't look like the author's photo at all. So, this is the experience where narrator faced in his life. In this lesson, he said, through his words, he shows that reality versus technical expertise. In the story, we meet a typical photographer who, on the pretext of creativity, exaggerates the real features of the narrator's face, there is an ordinary incident in the story. The narrator visits the studio of a photograph to get his photograph clicked. The narrator asks the photographer, I want my photograph taken. The photographer must have felt happy at the arrival of a customer, but he shows no expression on his face. The narrator also tells us about the physical features of a photographer. He was a thin man in a grey suit with the dim eyes of natural scientists. The line everybody knows what a photograph. Alike shows that in the narrator's opinion all photographs look alike. So even here narrator just described the photograph. How he looks like photographer is look like a natural scientist. Everyone will be say like every photographer will be look like a scientist only. Sit there, he said, and wait. The narrator had to wait for an hour. This also shows the photographer's apathy for the customers. There was no other customer in the studio. And even was no other customer in the studio. And even then the narrator was made to wait for an hour. The narrator now describes as to how the studio looked in from inside. He sat in beam for sunlight. Which was coming from some opening in a window. After that, the photographer pulled a machine into the middle of the room and put his head into it just for a second to have a glimpse of the narrator's face. I know, the narrator said. Then he took a long breath. He said, the face would be better 3/4 full. At this, the narrator started speaking enthusiastically about faces. But the photographer did not show any interest in what the narrator was saying. Then the photographer came over and took narrator's head in his hands and twisted it sideways. The narrator thought he was about to kiss him, and so he closed his eyes. But the photographer didn't do it. He stood looking at it. Then he sighed and said, I don't like your head. Then he went back to the machine and took another look. Open the mouth. A little, he said. The narrator obeyed, and then he told him to close it. After a few moments, he said, the ears are bad, and dropped them a little more. Thank you. Now the eyes, roll them in under the eyelids. Put the hands on the knees. Please, and turn the face just a little upward. Yes, that's better. Like this. He was just instructing. The narrator is obeying. So all this criticizing, all is commanding, he just hearing. Now just expand the lungs and bend the neck. That's it. Just contract the face. It's just little too full, but the narrator stood at once from the stool. I will stop the story here. I will come to the next part video and we will continue the story. Thank you.